Hello, hello, hello. My name is Jill Osborne. I am the president and founder of the Interstitial Cystitis Network. It is Thursday, March 21st. I had an extra hour to spend, and so I just thought I'd drop in and do what we call a drop-in IC support group meeting. See if any IC patients out there might be having some issues right now. If you have any questions or anything like that. And so my purpose in doing these meetings is we do them scheduled twice a month, the first and third Sunday. Hi, Donna. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Sue. So you can find our regularly scheduled IC support group meetings on the first and third Sunday of the month. However, I do drop-in meetings, and it's all about finding the right time. So like right now, it's almost 5 o'clock Pacific time. So I'm hoping I'm going to catch some people coming home from work in California, but I'm also hoping that we're going to catch some people on the East Coast who are getting ready for bed and who might have questions. I only have, though, an hour, 90 minutes at the most before I've got to go fix my elderly parents' dinner. Alrighty. Hi, Wendy. Wendy, she says, I hope you're having an amazing day. All right. True confessions. True confessions. I'm having a flare, but I'm not having an IC flare. I'm having a vulvodynia flare. And holy mother of you know what? It is uncomfortable. Trying to figure out what triggered it is, of course, my challenge. For those of you who don't know what vulvodynia is, it means that you feel like you have a yeast infection even when you don't. It feels like somebody's rubbed sandpaper along your vulva and along your perineum. And in some cases, it's from a chemical irritation. In other cases, it might be some infection and other, that's like the great mystery is what causes vulvodynia. All I know is it happened to me when I was in high school, a couple of years of vulvodynia, to the point that I was the queen of buying Monistat. And I would go to my wonderful OBGYN at the time in high school, Dr. Renfrey, who would say, Jill, you have the most sensitive vulva I have seen in my life. Hello, redhead. And so got it calmed down with the help of a vulvodynia support group and started using a peri bottle. And of course, anybody who's a member of the IC network, one of our gifts to you is a peri bottle, because it's important that we rinse that skin off, especially when you're older and you're dry. We don't want to rub dry toilet paper on dry skin. It will be irritating. And toilet paper will not get bacteria off of your skin. But if you rinse first with a peri bottle and then pat yourself dry, you will find that that helps dramatically. So I've been doing that for about a week. I'm better. Yesterday, I was kind of almost crying. Today, I'm better. But it's just so frustrating. And, so it's like every time I have a flare, I always use this as an opportunity to re-experience what I know so many of you are going through, because I've been really steady for a long time. I haven't had a vulvodynia flare like this in 10 years. My best guess is that it's actually from a new batch of mini pads. I had just bought a new batch of mini pads, and like literally that day, I started feeling burning. And I've had that before. If you've ever bought menstrual pads or mini pads, you pull it out of the box and you get a really strong glue odor. That has happened to me several times with Always brands. And so whenever I get that glue odor, I just take it back to the store and say, there's something wrong with this. I want another one. And I didn't do it this time. I didn't smell it this time. And I think that's what happened. I think I've got a chemical burn, chemical irritation on my vulva. So to those of you out there who are a little squirmy today, I just want you to know I'm a little squirmy today myself, and it is indeed frustrating. Now, I always do these meetings in 3 sections. Number 1, I usually do a little educational thing. Number 2, I take questions. And number 3, I do a freebie. However, I'm going to do a reveal first. I want to share with you the new IC Optimist, which I was earlier. We just got it from the printer yesterday. It is in the process of being mailed out. I'm just putting up on our website now, but don't go to the website until tomorrow because I have to do more tonight. But look at, here is our wonderful new magazine, our newest issue of the IC Optimist. And I will tell you, I think this is one of the best we've ever done. I just love diving into these. We have this fabulous team of researchers and writers like Stacy Shannon, who helps so much. And so in this issue, it's all about the subtle causes of IC urinary symptoms. You know, I mean, look, we got our subtypes, right? We've got Hunner's lesions, bladder wall, pelvic floor, pudendal neuralgia, central sensitization. We've got those core fundamental subtypes. But there are always, and as Dr. Payne said when he proposed this subtyping system, and what every researcher says is, there are a lot of variants. There are a lot of variants here. There are a lot of things that can trigger urinary symptoms and pelvic pain. And so the feature story that I wrote is on fibroids. And so if you've ever had, for women who ever have had a fibroid before, fibroids are benign growths that can be in the uterine wall on the inside. It can be exactly in the middle of the uterine wall. It can be protruding into the uterine cavity, or it can be protruding outside of the cavity. Now, what do you think is next to this? The bladder. The bladder. So some people have uterines so big, they're like watermelons or pumpkins. And if that's pushing on your bladder, that can be the source of some of your pain. And we had a research study that came out a couple months ago, which showed that I want to remember, let's see, it was something like 97% of women with fibroids had urinary symptoms. And when the fibroid was treated and removed, 67% of them were cured of their urinary symptoms. So I'm very, very intrigued and invested in wanting to make sure we understand the little things that can be triggering your issues. Another example, we had a patient diagnosed with IC, went through all the treatments, and nothing worked for her, but she had a hunch. She'd heard about pudendal neuralgia. And she went to her doctor and they x-rayed her or did an MRI or something of her pelvis. And what they found was that her sacrum was massively bent in the wrong direction. And we tell her story in here. She shares her patient story in here. So what worked for her? Chiropractic care. And she's now 70 to 80% better. And she's getting chiropractic care routinely to keep her bony structures in the proper place. So in this issue, we have, number one, we've got a big story on fibroids, why they happen, what you can do about them, all that sort of stuff. But then I also was given an opportunity to pay for and reprint a story that appeared on another website in mainstream media. And it was what causes interstitial cystitis, how 10 women got to the root of their problem. And I think this is fascinating because these are 10 women who treated their IC differently and have improved dramatically. And it kind of goes back to subtyping and sub-subtyping, right? So Hannah, age 23, pelvic floor dysfunction. Tabitha, age 24, endometriosis. Megan, age 45, leaky gut. Leaky gut. Laura, age 51, candida, that she had a persistent candida infection in her urinary tract. And we know that's possible because our own MAP research network, funded and run by the National Institutes of Health, has found an overgrowth of candida in IC patients having flares. So here's a story of somebody, and we've had other people. We had somebody in our last meeting last Sunday who also had a fungal infection. So we share the story of Laura, who was able to treat her symptoms. Dana, Lyme disease, because Lyme bacteria can actually enter the bladder wall and persist there. Denise had food intolerances. Kimberly, chemical sensitivities. Alexis, autoimmune disease. Chronic UTI, gut dysbiosis, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, as you are out there trying to figure out your thing, and why you're having these symptoms. You know, what I don't want you to do is give up. And what I don't want you to do is accept you have IC. You are an anatomical mystery to be solved. I want you to start thinking outside the box. Okay, number one, start with your subtypes, but then go beyond that. It's like, okay, listen, if you have really painful periods and you bleed profusely, come on, we got to rule out endometriosis and fibroids. That is an absolute potential cause of your urinary symptoms. If you've had any pelvic injuries where your tailbone is out of place or your tailbone's been broken and you've got urinary symptoms, let's revisit that tailbone injury. Is there something with that? Is there a legacy of that that can still be treated? Or, you know, I always say for some people, I see it's a bit of a wake-up call because it's kind of a come to Jesus moment about your diet and how you're living. Some of you out there are eating incredibly poor diets, very, very high in sugar. We know sugar promotes inflammation. It's something I struggle with every day. I'm always trying to keep my sugar intake down. It is so hard. But I know that I feel better when I eat less sugar. I also know I feel better when I don't eat white bread. So anyway, so this is going to be available on our website. It already is available in the email area, but I don't have the slides up or anything like that. But I'm very, very excited about this. So this is our late winter, early spring. What else do I have in here? I've got a story on, oh, here we go. So we all know, you know, the devastating news that Lyris, the only treatment in history that has healed Hunter's lesions in just 2 weeks, got deprioritized by Allergan. But did you know we have another therapy that's actually working really well with lesions right now and is now available around the United States and around in other countries too? Hello, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. You know, have you ever, you know, when you got a scuba diver who surfaces too quick and they get nitrogen in their blood, what do? They put them in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. They breathe pure oxygen and it basically fills their body with oxygen and pushes out the toxics that occurred when they came from depth too quickly. Well, it turns out that hyperbaric oxygen therapy is also very, very good at delivering oxygen throughout the body, and it's used in many, many contexts, from burn injuries to foot ulcers, deafness, gangrene, traumatic injury, carbon monoxide poisoning, abscesses, brain abscesses, anemia, well, radiation injury, skin grafts, radiation cystitis. But now we get to add interstitial cystitis to that list because we now have 5 studies, 2 in Europe, 2 in Japan. 2 in Europe, 1 in Japan, 2 in the United States, which is showing that this is very promising. Of course, the challenge is, does your local urologist even know about it? And the answer is probably not. Probably not, because they don't go to the conferences or necessarily read the research journals like we do. And that's why you would read this. I've got links to all the research studies so that you can give this to your doctor and say, hey, we've tried everything else for my ulcers or lesions. Can we maybe try this instead? Now, of course, there are some risks. You know, one of the things that can happen with this is that you can get a temporary loss of hearing, that your eardrum can rupture, or you can become nearsighted temporarily. So you always have to, you know, weigh the pros and the cons, the risks for the benefits as you consider things. I have an article on the cold and flu strategies research we did. Let's see, what else do I have in here? Stacy Shannon contributed a wonderful article on staying connected because, hello, what do? We isolate. I have not left my house in a week. No, I take that back because I went to the doctor today. You know, when you're in pain, you don't want to do stuff. In fact, I was invited to trivia tonight and I passed because I knew I was not going to be comfortable sitting today. So Stacy Shannon offers a great article there, and And my friends, now listen, we can, come on now, we're adults. We can talk about anything, right? I have no problems talking about pretty much anything. If I could ask you to raise your hands, I would, but you don't need to do that. Every single one of us, I am sure, has experienced moments when you're constipated. And when you're constipated, what happens? It irritates your bladder and it triggers more pain. Or you're taking amitriptyline, Elavil, hydroxyzine, pain medicine, other things, of which a side effect is constipation. So here you're taking a medicine that's supposed to help your bladder, but it's making you constipated, which is hurting your bladder, and you're stuck in this vicious circle, right? And then, God forbid, you get constipated, and then you strain your pelvic floor muscles, and you're in just like a world of hurt, right? We've all been there. We have all been there. So I got a great article on fiber. And it talks about soluble fibers, which are bladder friendly and IBS friendly versus, I'm sorry, hold on. See, I can't see. Well, insoluble fibers. Anyway, got to be real. We're trying to get through the day, right, my friends? We're trying to get through the day. We're trying to reduce our pain, and that's just plays a role in it. I have for you geeks out there, because some of you are geeks. Sometimes I do this on our Facebook page, and sometimes I do it in the website. I have this time a crossword puzzle on some of the more arcane things out there about IC. I double dog dare you to see if you can do it without looking at the answers. And then I also have a self-help tip on that's from me personally about how to maintain your focus and positivity, because hello, I could not do this work if I did not have a really good daily orientation to keep me happy and positive and encouraged, even when I'm having a vulvodynia flare like this very moment. So that's my quick little reveal here. And so we'll be talking about this in our next meeting, and just come to the website in the next day or two, the IC network, and you'll be able to get this or sign up for a subscription if you'd like to do this. I want to make sure that I take a moment and thank our sponsor, Prelief, also known as DSC Healthcare Solutions. Prelief is the most popular supplement that has ever been used in the IC community. It reduces the acid of foods you might be eating. So if you're going to go out to dinner with some friends, go have some pizza or some pasta, try Prelief beforehand. I'm writing an article right now for them on salsa. And you know that 2 Preliefs actually reduce 95% of the acid in 2 tablespoons of salsa. So I've been working with this company for many, many years. There came a time when we almost lost Prelief. The original manufacturer almost gave it up. And I was talking with him one day, and he said, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to keep doing it. And I just jumped through the roof, and it's like, please don't. Thousands, tens of thousands of patients have used this. This helps people eat a more balanced diet, especially if you're afraid to eat. Having that little bit of extra acid irritation, especially if you're IC subtype 1, subtype 2, is really, really important. So if you've never tried Prelief, try it. However, I always say more is not better. I come from a less is more perspective. I don't believe in taking a lot of anything. Little bits, my friends, little bits. So don't take any supplement like candy. Okay, don't take any supplement like candy. You take it as needed. So with Prelief, you would take it before you eat. Okay. All right. Now I want to, but there is one thing I want to talk about, and it was kind of inspired by a patient I was working with today, and also in this article, and that is, what is up with patients who have overlapping pain conditions? And I'm one of them. So we got the painful bladder. We got the painful vulva. We got the irritable bowel. We've got many of us, if not most of us, have TMJ. We tend to have tight pelvic floor muscles. Some of us have Sjogren's. I have Sjogren's. I have a variant of Sjogren's called Sika. Very, very dry eyes, not so much dry mouth, but I wake up 3 or 4 times a night and have to put eye drops in my eyes. I've been doing that for 10 years now. And because my eyes don't produce tears like a normal eye would. And there's a lot of people out there who like to say that IC is autoimmune. And I think it is for a small population of patients, but not for everyone. Because remember, we got muscle injuries. That's clear. I mean, seriously, if your IC started after having a baby where you had a muscle tear, this is not autoimmune. You have a freaking muscle tear. If you've got Hunner's lesions, you know, those we've got some research now suggesting that that's viral infection for some of us. If you've got chronic candida, chronic infection, you know, again, not necessarily autoimmune. Autoimmune implies that our body is attacking or what's the right word? Interfering with a normal bodily process. And so we call this, so that you're really in the loop here, as I was helping a patient today going through a Social Security application, we call this a chronic overlapping pain condition, COPC, chronic overlapping pain condition. And so if you are ever applying for Social Security, you want to make sure you use that term, chronic overlapping pain condition, if this is true for you. And there is a fabulous chronic pain research group that is actually being led. It's a fascinating story where the IBS group got together, the vulvodynia group got together, a whole bunch of these groups got together, the IBS, and they were all asking the same question: is why do we all have these things? Why does somebody with TMJ have a bladder thing or a bowel thing? Why does somebody with a bladder thing have fibro, whatever? And so it is the TMJ Association that is leading this incredible research team to try to get to the bottom of why we have chronic overlapping pain conditions. So this is not in your head. This is real. And I think we're getting closer and closer and closer every day. I've done articles on this in the past, but you might want to Google chronic pain research. And God, the name just flipped right through my brain. Like the Chronic Pain Research Collaborative, something like that. Anyway, you'll find it if you Google it, okay? And I will try to put a link to it on our Facebook page so that you can see that too, because we got some really cutting edge, fascinating research happening. One of the things that they're kind of exploring is obviously genetics. Another thing that we're exploring is the biome. Could our biome be contributing to this? Has our bacterial biome, our human biome been damaged to some degree? Childhood trauma is something they're looking at. Gosh, and there's something else. Hold on a sec. There's something else I want to show you. Let me see if I can find it. Even the MAP Research Network. The MAP Research Network is amazing for what they're doing because they're studying everything. Man, they are trying to get to the bottom of this. So they're looking at bacteria. They're looking at nerve function. They're looking at related conditions. They're looking at biopsy results. They're just all over the place. It's so amazing. Nobody out there should assume that research is not happening with IC. It is alive and kicking and exciting and revealing, and it's teaching us more every single day. I had a great graph here in one of these articles I thought you'd get a kick out of. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, I found it. Yes. Awesome. Here we go. This was a recent article in, I had to pay for it. I think it was Nature. Urologic Chronic Pelvic Pain Syndrome Insights from the MAP Research Network. So this is a team that has been working for 15 years to try to understand the great diversity in this patient population and what could be driving these symptoms. They're right now focusing a lot on sensitivity. You know, that's huge. But I wanted to show you So they finished phase 1 in 2014. They're now on phase 2. Okay, here it is. This is kind of cool. And I know you're not going to be able to read this, but these are all the areas that they're studying simultaneously. They have a multi-skilled, multi-professional research team. So they've got gastroenterologists, urologists, gynecologists, radiologists, neurologists, microbiologists. They've got this really diverse team trying to do this. So here's what they're studying. The urologists are studying the physical examination of the bladder and urine culture results and flares and all that sort of stuff. Then we have a whole other team that's looking at those other related conditions. And they're doing body maps, trying to see where the most common pain is for people who have these related conditions, including fibro, IBS, migraine, TMJ, vulvodynia. We've got another team that's working on kind of brain function. Another team that is doing neuroimaging, another team doing sensory testing, another team doing molecular phenotyping, looking really closely at urine for biomarkers, blood spots. What's urine like when somebody's having a flare? What's urine like if they're not having a flare? They're doing cheek swabs. They're looking at genetics. And then we have yet a whole nother team that's looking at the biome. They're looking at urethral urine, what's living in urethral urine, what's living in midstream urine, what's living in post-prostate massage urine, and how your urine changes between a flare and a non-flare. And then a whole other team that's working on animal models, although that's something that I personally have challenges with. So the moral of my story is that yes, we have these subtypes, but we have this one really interesting subtype of chronic overlapping pain conditions. And if you're in that group like I am, I want you to carry hope in your heart. You've done nothing wrong. This is not your fault. There is no shame. There is no blame. You are not alone in this struggle. The odds are other people in your family have the same thing. Genetics may play a role in this as well, too. Okay. So with the patient that I was working with today on our Social Security stuff, that's what we talked about is let's start adding some information on that for the judge so that they can see that there is a relationship and that the federal government is investigating that relationship. All right, so that's my little thing. So it's time to take some questions. Ooh, Christine on YouTube says she broke her. And just so you know, if I'm looking up, I'm looking at Facebook. If I'm looking down, I'm looking at YouTube. So I'm looking at YouTube right now. Christine says she broke her tailbone at 12. The piece that broke off punctured her colon. Yikes. Bad infection happened, inserted drainage tube, hospital stay of 2 weeks. Well, there's a significant pelvic trauma, and it would be very interesting to look at the long-term kind of longitudinal effects of that trauma, if any. Because I remember breaking the tip of my tailbone off because I could touch it and move it around, but it didn't go anywhere. I mean, what kid doesn't fall on their tailbone once bad, right? DP says, can you please explain about V Magic and topical lidocaine for burning, how it works? So you guys, you have to remember that your bladder is like your mouth. It's a hollow organ covered with mucus. It is a mucus membrane organ, just like your lips, just like your vulva, just like your vagina. It's wet for a reason. It is that mucus that provides an important protective coating. That mucus on your vulva would repel bacteria and or dirt, or if you're in the bathtub, irritants from that nice healthy mucosal layer would keep that away from the cells of your skin. But the human body is not infallible. Things get damaged. And you have to remember that our body was designed tens of thousands of years ago based upon our genetics. I come from Norway. So what were my ancestors eating 5,000 years ago? Very bland diet. They were eating fish. They were eating deer. They were eating seal. They were eating apples, greens, salt. That's it. There was no chili. There was no orange juice. There was no citrus. So we can argue successfully, in my case, that my body has not necessarily had an opportunity to adapt to higher levels of acid as perhaps somebody who is of a Mediterranean descent, Spanish descent, whatever. So V Magic is a organic olive oil, avocado oil, sea buckthorn oil that you can put on your skin and down on your tender bits as an extra layer of coating. Because remember what happens when your mouth is dry. When your mouth is dry, it hurts. You go drink water. When your vulva is dry, it hurts, but you can't go drink water. But you can put a barrier on there, and that's what V Magic does. V Magic seems to be well tolerated. I have no problems with it. However, I have now talked with one patient who got a rash from it. So obviously, everybody has different sensitivities. Jen on Facebook says, how do you get the magazine? You subscribe to the IC Network. You come on over to our website, the IC Network. And if you go into our shop, you can become a member. You can get it for $25 a year by email or $50 a year by snail mail. And you get lots of other things with your subscriptions, depending upon, you have a member page. You'll be able to download past issues, our flare guide, our diet guide. Our biggest membership also gives a cookbook away. So they're memberships of the IC Network, and that's the fundraising that goes into supporting all of our IC activities like IC Awareness Month and these chats and stuff. All right, let me go back down to Facebook. YouTube, you guys have been busy. Judy is asking, has anybody tried InterStim? And Judy, InterStim was actually invented here in Northern California. I was the support group leader in Northern California when it was invented. Thus, I had the opportunity to work with many, if not most, of the early InterStim patients. And so InterStim neuromodulation has been an interest of mine for 25 years. And over on the IC Network website in our support forum, I've got 4 discussion boards considering neuromodulation, trying neuromodulation, success stories, and failures. Neuromodulation uses a mild electric impulse to kind of remodulate the nerves of the urinary tract, because the theory is maybe the nerves are dysfunctional. So if you give them a mild, gentle pulse, perhaps they will straighten out and behave normally. It was originally invented at UC San Francisco. InterStim is a invasive form of neuromodulation. It requires surgery, 2 surgeries, 3 surgeries, maybe even more if there are problems with it. And the ultimate challenge with InterStim is that it can cause very, very severe, in some cases, life-threatening side effects. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of side effects filed with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. If you Google MAUDE, M-A-U-D-E, MAUDE database on the FDA website, type InterStim, go back for a year, you can read all of them. We did it in a support group meeting here like 2 weeks ago, and there were, I don't know, like 100 just in the last month. So you have to really understand that InterStim comes with a lot of potential side effects. And interestingly, another doctor at UC San Francisco, his name is Dr. Marshall Staller, was so outraged by what he saw patients going through with InterStim that he said, hey guys, you don't have to cut somebody open and put the lead in their lower back. You can hit that same nerve right at the ankle where it's about a ½ inch from the surface of the skin. And he is the guy who invented what is now known as urgent PC. It's called post-tibial nerve stimulation. I was one of those early patients. I'm very blessed that when I got sent to UCSF, I did not end up in the InterStim group. I ended up in the urgent PC group. I had my first 2 hours without pain at week 3. I had my first day without pain at week 7 using urgent PC. So over on our website, we have a whole section, educational information on the different forms of neuromodulation. Check them out. The advantage of the ankle stim is it's not invasive. it just uses an acupuncture needle. Number 2, no surgery is required. Therefore, there's no surgical risk. And number 3, the cost is minimal compared to surgery. I want to give you one very, very important warning about InterStim. I was working with a patient about 2 years ago. She was a nurse somewhere on the East Coast in a small town. There were 3 urologists there. They all said, you know, we won't treat. You have to do InterStim. We're not going to give you anything else. You have to do InterStim. She didn't really want to do it, but she felt like she was pressured into it. But because she was a medical care provider, she's kind of familiar with some of the issues. So she talked to the doctor's billing person and said, is this approved by my health insurance? And they said, yes, no pre-authorization is required. Then she called the company and said, is this covered by my health insurance? They said, yes, no pre-authorization is required. Then she called the hospital billing department and said, are you sure this is 100% covered by my insurance? They said, yes, 100% coverage, no pre-authorization required. So she had the surgery. Within 2 weeks, she had a letter to garnish her wages saying she owed $80,000 because guess what? It wasn't approved. So always, 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 always get that in writing first. If you're thinking about InterStim, make sure you get it in writing that it's covered. And another really important question to ask your doctor is, if I lose my health insurance, will you still care for my InterStim? Because InterStim is metal in your body. It requires constant monitoring. You do not walk away. You have to make sure that if there's a problem, you've got a doctor that you can count on. But guess what? You know, it's kind of like having a fair weather friend, only it's a fair weather insurance friend. There are some doctors who are really enthusiastic. Bam, yes, do InterStim. And then you lose your health insurance and they won't see you anymore. And then you're left scrambling. I had one lady whose InterStim was shocking her. It's a clear device malfunction. The doctor who put it in wouldn't see her because she didn't have insurance anymore. So she had to call, I had her call the company, and the company was able to help her find somebody who would help her. But imagine she's being shocked by a device for weeks before she gets cared for. And the guy who put it in wouldn't see her just because, you know, she lost her insurance, which I thought was a tremendous tragedy. So you have to understand there's a longitudinal care issue, and you and your doctor have to be in it for the long run with InterStim. You don't really walk away from it, you know. And if it's not working, for goodness sake, get it out. Don't leave it in there, because the longer it's in, the harder it is to take out. Again, all this information is on our website. All right, you guys, if I miss one of your questions, especially on Facebook, please ask it again, because sometimes it won't let me scroll back. Jen says, what do you treat if you have painful fibroids? Hysterectomy. We're trying to figure out my pain, but I do have large fibroids. Jen, get our magazine. You know what, Jen? If you email me, icnetwork@mac.com, I will email you the magazine, no charge, so you can read that article, hun, because we go through all the treatments for it. Kelly says, I will never give up. However, I've been doing the hydrodistension every 3 months per year. I would love to start a support group in Rochester. I've also had bladder cancer. Thank you for your work. You prompt a healthy way of IC treatment. Oh, thank you, hun. So hydrodistensions every 3 months is pretty extreme. And what I would say to you is I would really want to look at your subtyping a little bit more. Let's make sure we haven't missed something else that could be driving your symptoms, because having a general anesthesia every 3 months to have your bladder tested is pretty extreme. And it's really only a few patients who would ever do that. And so I would encourage you, especially if you're considering being a support group leader, you've really got to take a step back, dive into your knowledge level first. And if you want to contact me, I would be happy to turn you on to some articles that I think might give you a good grounding. I always say to support group leaders, your opinion is the least important opinion in the room. A support group leader really isn't supposed to have an opinion. We're supposed to facilitate discussion and provide information and show you where to go next. These are different because these are lectures, so I can have my opinion there. But if we were actually in a meeting, what I would do is I would actually tell you where to go next, and we would go there together and look at the data together. I'm a rebel. Elizabeth, my mom has IC worse now after a hysterectomy about a month ago. How long does the pain flare for? Elizabeth, girl, come on. Hysterectomy is the one of the hardest surgeries a woman can have. I had it almost 2 years ago, and I am still recovering from it. She still has stitches. If she had surgery just a month ago, she's going to have stitches holding her together for 2 more months. It is a beast of a surgery to recover from. You're not supposed to lift heavy things. You got to be careful bending over, and you can't do that for months because you don't want to rip those stitches. I ripped one bending over and picking up a damn t-shirt. It's ridiculous. So there's a wonderful website, hystersisters.com, that she should go sign up for and read those materials with. I will say let's see, my severe pain lasted about a week, but then I had about every day I would do something that would really hurt it, and I would have to take a quarter of a Norco. And then as time went on, that got better and better and better. Also understand too, she might be having muscle spasms. I had a lot of muscle spasms for almost 10 months. And so using a muscle relaxant might help those spasms, especially if she's having rectal pain. If she's feeling like there's a fist up her vagina that's pulling downward, that's a levator spasm. And a muscle relaxant like Flexeril might be really helpful. And that's what got me through that recovery far more than the pain meds, although I use those. But it was a muscle relaxant I found the most helpful in improving my post-hysterectomy discomfort. You know, when I hurt my knee the other day and, oh, it's pulsing, I hope I didn't tear a ligament. Ooh. If I come back with crutches, you know I did something I shouldn't have done. Hope to get into the doctor for that tomorrow. Penny says magnesium and more water took away her severe pain that she'd had for years, giving your body nutritionally what it was screaming for. That's so important, you know, and we talk about that. You know, we also know that some patients will have a vitamin D deficiency or a B12 deficiency, and having a really good blood workup is important. Alexis says she takes hydrocodone as needed for extreme flare-ups. I do too, but I never take a whole pill. I take a quarter of a pill, and I might do that once every 3 months. I took one today for my little vulvodynia thing a couple hours ago, a little quarter of a pill. So I can sit here and not cry, but it's better today than it was yesterday. Dina says she had 2 seizures out of nowhere years apart between your periods of your IC. Dina, that's fascinating. She had 2 seizures before her IC came back. Boy, I know some researchers who would love to talk to you. That's fascinating. I've never heard that before. That's certainly not very common, but I believe you. And again, the MAP Research Network is doing brain imaging studies, and we're definitely seeing that people in pain have different functions going on in their brain. Different parts of their brain are lighting up when they're in pain versus when they're not in pain. So that's fascinating. Oh, Sue says she's got the same thing, IC, TMJ, dry eyes, vulvodynia, IBS. And you say plantar fasciitis. And you know what? I also had plantar fasciitis. I also had migraines for about 6 months in my 20s. Thank God they went away. Thank God. Dina says she sees Dr. Robert Eckenberg in Pennsylvania. He practices in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. He's probably the top pelvic pain doctor in the United States. His career is dedicated to educating other doctors about the many different things that can cause pelvic pain, not just, because as we know, many women have had completely inappropriate hysterectomies only to discover after the fact that they were having either muscle pain or bladder pain. So having somebody like Dr. Eckenberg look at you and really give you a fair analysis of your anatomy is really, really important. You can, and I say this almost every day to patients, man, if you're living in a little town somewhere out in the boonies with one urologist and you've had issues for years and you're not getting better, and in fact, you might be getting worse, there comes a time when you deserve to see a national expert. Even once, that you will get more out of a visit with Dr. Eckenberg in 15 minutes, or Dr. Peters, or Dr. Mulderin, or Dr. Evans. 15 minutes with them is the equivalent, in many cases, of 5 years with a local urologist. And I'm not lying there. I'm not lying, because they have such a depth of experience. Emily says, can you get supplemental disability for having IC and endo? Yeah. Well, you might be able to get disability insurance. There are two different forms of insurance. There's supplemental security income from Social Security, which are for people who have not been able to work and you are indeed very, very low income, versus Social Security disability, which requires that you will have worked at approximately 10 years, earned 4/4 of wages, where you have paid into that insurance system. And in both cases, yes, people have been approved for IC and endo and other, but you definitely have to make your case well. Sue says, do unscented dryer sheets cause problems? I think any dryer sheet causes problems for people who are chemically sensitive, because it is leaving a chemical coating on your underwear. And especially if you're menopausal, especially if you're chemically sensitive, you've got dry skin down there, those chemicals are going to go right into your skin. If I put on, and this was before I even went through menopause, back in my 30s, if I put on a pair of underwear washed in sheer Tide, within 5 minutes, I'd have urethral burning. And that's just from the chemicals left in the fabric. So no dryer sheets, no fabric softeners. Wool dryer balls are a great option instead. You guys are so good at supporting each other. I'm so proud of you. I know I've missed some stuff here and it won't let me scroll back. Darn it, darn it, darn it. If you had a question and I missed it, please ask it again. Penny says she had 2 InterStims, neither worked, both were removed. I regret getting them. And the doctor left wires embedded near your spine. Yeah, that's unfortunately, that's what they don't tell you, is that sometimes getting them out is pretty hard, especially if they've been in for a long period of time. I worked with one guy, one of the original Richard Schmidt InterStim patients back in, he had it done like in 1992. And I think I found him like, I don't know, 2005 or later, 2010. And he just turned it off and walked away with wires hanging out of his back. And it was like, dude, really, go get it taken out. But it's too late now. Those wires get embedded with scar tissue. But I hope he at least went and had as much taken out as he could. Penny said that she tried the ankle stimulation with lots of needles in your ankles. Regret that it did not work. I'm going to tell you that there's a very big difference between Dr. Marshall Staller, who invented it, versus Urgent PC, who brought it to market. The company that Dr. Staller originally licensed it to went belly up. And I know that because he and I flew to London and we were on the BBC, and I was the demonstration for it years and years and years ago. So the company he was working with that he trained went belly up. Urgent PC came along from another company, and they don't have the level of finesse that Dr. Staller had. And as an example, how many times do I show this? let's see. I don't know if you can see this, but I have a little black spot, a little black tattoo right there. Yeah, maybe kind of, sort of. I have them on both ankles because they taught us how to do it at home. And it was just an acupuncture needle and a TENS unit and a little tiny device that they did. But when you put the needle in, this is where I really disagree with Uroplasty. And I mean, it's not Uroplasty anymore. Another company bought them. But when they brought Urgent PC on the market and I saw the way they were doing it, I said, but you aren't looking at the same benchmark that Dr. Staller was. So with Dr. Staller, the needle is placed roughly 3 fingers above the center of your ankle bone, right? But then it's actually about a ½ an inch down. But then there's some angling. You have to angle the needle correctly. So the way we knew that it was done correctly, if it was a perfect position, the big toe, as soon as we turned it on, the big toe flopped down. So we knew if the big toe flopped down, we were on the right nerve, bam, ready to go. If the big toe didn't flop down, but the other toes kind of splayed out, you know, kind of did a splaying thing, that was almost as good. And I was really surprised with even recently, the Urgent PC people, staff that are doing it and training it, they don't go for that benchmark. And so I don't believe that they're as accurate. I don't think they're doing it as well as Dr. Staller was doing it. That's my guess. Mandy says, is there generally a root cause identified with those who have IC that is probably genetic? Yeah, you and me both, hon, because it runs in my family too. There is a specific chromosome, and it's on my list. I want to say chromosome 18, but don't quote me on that. You know, they have been mapping the human genome for the last 20 years, really trying to understand our DNA and which part of our DNA relates to different diseases and stuff like that. And there's one chromosome in particular that seems to be a target. I just don't remember the specifics, so I don't want to give you the wrong information there. But genetics definitely are at play, but also central sensitization is definitely at play. Those of us who are Scandinavian or Northern European or German or Irish or whatever, we tend to see more of the skin sensitivity than in others. So I think the sensitivity plays a role. And that's, again, what the MAP Research Network is working on. We're you know, we can't give you any absolutes, but I can tell you we're getting closer, and that's important. You know, you got to realize when I was in my 20s, graduated from college, working, having IBS almost every day, then I went to grad school, couldn't sit through lectures. Every time I went out to eat, I had diarrhea. Like, what the hell was going on with my body? And I became very, very despondent. You know, it's like every year something new. I mean, so to go from the IBS to the vulvodynia to the migraines to this to that, whatever. So freaking confusing. And then in the early 1990s, the first genetic studies came out from the University of Maryland where they studied twins. And it was like the light bulb turned on for me. It's like, oh, wait a second. You mean it's not me? That I might have inherited this? And then you take a look at your family and you go, well, yeah, wait a second. My sister, my mother, my grandmother, my cousin, it's all passed down. And just to be able to accept that strong data should take any guilt, any shame, any blame away from you. I don't want anybody to feel like this is your fault. For those of us with some of these chronic overlapping pain conditions, genetics definitely play a role. And today's modern lifestyle absolutely plays a role. Man, we got to clean stuff up. This is an environmentally risky world that we live in. Pamela says she loves her IC Chef cookbook. Thank you. We're working on the new list, the new diet list for this year. Maybe I'll put it out in our summer magazine. I'm hoping. Penny, I don't know who you're talking about. I missed that, hun. You said you're on the radio, somebody who helped you to learn how to heal your IC, listen to the I'd love to hear who that is. You can download the magazine, yes. Penny says, hydrodistension causes the bladder to shrink. Not technically. Lasering the bladder could cause the buildup of scar tissue, which would cause it to shrink. But traumatizing the bladder repeatedly certainly is not necessarily something that we want to do. I mean, the worst thing you can do to a bladder is stretch it, over-distend it, hydrodistend it massively. And that's why the American Urology Association guidelines no longer recommend high-pressure, long-duration hydrodistensions. When a hydrodistension is done, it is supposed to be low-pressure, short duration to minimize trauma to the bladder so that the bladder would not develop scar tissue and shrink and et cetera, et cetera. Sue is 2 years post-op, hysterectomy, and still struggling. Girl, I hear you. Every now and then, I feel it too. It is so weird. Christy, had Botox 2 months, and now what a difference. Good, hun. I'm so glad that Botox is working for you. Botox is a step 4 treatment option. Used to be step 5 because one of the risks of Botox is if you accidentally numb the nerve that controls urination, you might not be able to pee for a couple of months. But what they did is they learned that a half dosage was equally effective without causing as much urinary retention, which is why it's reclassified to step 4. And so I'm really glad that it worked for you. Botox should never be done on somebody who's not able to self-catheterize. So there's this kind of move to give it to people with frequency urgency in convalescent hospitals, and that is a gross misuse of this technology when the company itself says in their documentation that patient should be able to self-catheterize if necessary, in my opinion, of course. Penny says she had a friend with 2 children and said her IC symptoms were actually not as bad when she was pregnant. That's very normal. Normal. Hormones, my friend. Hormones are a good thing for some of us. For some of us, again, this kind of smaller, obscure subtype that is not clearly fleshed out right now, we definitely see strong hormonal influences. And sometimes high estrogen is helpful and sometimes low estrogen is helpful. It's very all over the table. So Jen says she's currently doing pelvic floor physical therapy, learning biofeedback, but you're having spasms constantly showing all day long. Not sure how to manage this. My PT says she has never seen this. Hun, I had involuntary spasms in my pelvic floor for 10 months after my hysterectomy. Finally, the doctor could see them. It was just, sometimes that's what happens when there's extreme trauma to an area. So you could be having involuntary spasms. But what concerns me is that some physical therapists rely on biofeedback. And, there are some, kind of equipment geeks who just love using equipment and biofeedback and wands and stuff like that. But that's not really how you treat pelvic floor dysfunction. You got to get in there, I mean, this is kind of the demonstration that I use. So if you've got a tight muscle, or tight spasming muscle. So let's just pretend this is a tight spasming muscle. So, if you're using biofeedback, they would insert a wand and it would show on the electronics that your muscle are spasming. And the goal is to try to get you to calm down enough and to relax those muscles enough that they don't spasm anymore. But in my case, that would not have worked. And my OBGYN was really crystal clear that the way that we stopped my involuntary pelvic floor spasms was with hands-on pelvic floor physical therapy. There was a finger in my vagina constantly working these muscles until they let go. And it took about 3 times before they stopped spasming constantly. So I'd love to have Nicole Kosian or somebody like that talk about that if we can ever get, if she ever comes to one of our support group meetings. But standard of care, gold standard for people with pelvic floor dysfunction is not an instrument. It is somebody's hands and fingers touching muscle. Maybe you've got tight muscles here, loose muscles here. So they're going to work on this one tight one here. And it's that level of finesse that, a wand can't do. On the other hand, when you're at home and, sometimes physical therapists will train your husband or your partner how to do it, which is cool. But there are moments when you can use a glass wand also to stop a spasm. When you're spasming, gosh, let's just say I had sorry guys, I'm sitting on a towel here. Hold on. Stay. There kind of comes a point when you're spasming and it's like, you're not touching me with a 10-foot pole, which is what I did for the first 6 months. But finally, I was just like, all right, you can touch me. Help me fix this, please. And physical therapy worked beautifully. Hands-on physical therapy. Don't be afraid of it. Carol says, went to my doctor recommended by the IC network. He had no idea about the eye side effects. You're printing out the article. I told him to check out your website and share it with his patients. Thank you. Do you have pamphlets or flyers? No. We got articles. We've got some articles, but on our website, we have the blog. I wrote about it with direct links to the published research studies by the Emory Eye Center, and that's what you want to give him. And if he wants to participate in any of the, well, that's your urologist, right? That's not your eye doctor. Okay. Gina was just diagnosed with a 1-inch fibroid pushing into your colon. Cannot wait to read the article. Yeah. So you're definitely going to want to have that. You want to, Gina, you're going to talk to your doctor about your treatment options, because if that, some are slow growing, some are rapid growing. My sense would be if it was pushing into your colon, I'd probably want to do something about it while it's small. They can actually block the blood flow to it, embolization. And there are a lot of different ways of treating it. So it's going to take some thought on your part, because you don't want to do too much. I mean, if it's not giving you any symptoms, then why bother? But if it's giving you symptoms, there comes a time when you're probably going to want to nip it in the bud. I don't know. It's between you and your doctor. Angie says she's done 4 sessions of dry needling for your pelvic floor, and it's been amazing. Wonderful, wonderful. Dry needling helps with trigger points, guys. So sometimes, again, you got your muscles are supposed to be long and lean. And I can give you an example. When you actually think about muscles and how they function, muscles have horizontal fibers. And when they get tight, they slide. And then they release. So when you pop a bicep, you're forcing the muscle fibers to do this. And when you drop your arm, your muscles fibers slide back into kind of this position. What happens, though, is that sometimes muscle fibers get stuck. The little villi on the muscle fibers stick to each other, and you end up with a trigger point. And so if you've ever had a muscle knot on your back, you have somebody push it. When they push it and rub it, it can release. Well, if you've got a muscle knot in your pelvic floor, you want somebody to push on it. Or if they can't push on it, they can do something called dry needling, and that would work too. And so, Angie, I'm so glad that that's working for you. That is awesome. Dry needling is the insertion. Well, you know what? I'd love to have Angie describe it on Facebook. It's basically a way of manipulating a trigger point. And so it's a common alternative for people with extremely tight trigger points wherever they are in their body. Could be in their hamstring, could be in their back, or in their pelvic floor. Sue is going to see Dr. Ken Peters on Tuesday. Awesome. I've got another friend who just saw him over the weekend and was flying home today. I just am so grateful for these top tier doctors who have dedicated their careers to IC and to helping patients, and the compassion you get when you walk into one of their clinics because they have treated thousands of patients is nothing short of comforting, affirming. It's a soft, warm, gentle place to land as compared to a doctor in Podunk, USA who believes that IC is all in your head. And in fact, I got a terrible patient story yesterday. I don't know if you guys remember, we've talked a lot about silver nitrate, which is no longer used for IC. Silver nitrate is a bladder stripper, like chlorpactin. So this was done 20, 30, 40 years ago when it was believed that if you stripped off the bladder wall, a new healthy lining would grow. And so what they would do is they would put something very caustic in the bladder, strip the bladder lining off. And the new AUA guidelines, of course, don't even mention them. We don't do that anymore. And yet a patient was going in for an evaluation for her symptoms, and the doctor did it without her permission, did not even tell her what she was doing. She thought she was having a diagnostic workup. Shocking. Shocking. And we still see that every now and then. Do not let anybody put anything in your bladder unless you're sitting in front of them and you are having a discussion. Do not do it on the table with your knees up. For God's sake, we do not want anybody to have their bladder stripped anymore. And if anybody starts to do anything without your consent, you have the right to say stop, and you should stop. You should stop them. You need to be fully informed of what is happening in your body. And so if this doctor says, hey, I've got a new treatment we'd like to try, you're going to say, all right, tell me about it. What does it do? Where does it go? What are the side effects? Let's have a good discussion about this. I'm not just going to lay on my back, open my legs, and let you do whatever you want to do to my bladder. I want to know about it. I mean, not to be coarse like that, but sometimes sometimes we are all so desperate. That's what we do, myself included. And one of my points here in doing these support group meetings is to try to talk you off that ledge and say, okay, before we do anything rash, let's get some good knowledge first. We need knowledge. We need information. And then we'll make a decision about what to do. Right? All right. Elizabeth says she has TMJ and she's got to do jaw joint replacement surgery. Do you think we clench our jaw from pain? You know what? I actually just read a paper about that a little while ago, and it was kind of a double-edged thing. What they were saying is that people who clench their jaw also naturally clench their pelvic floor, and people who have clenched their pelvic floor usually also have tight jaw muscles. So it's a clenching thing. The question is why? I don't know why. Is it stress? Is it the way our muscles are working? I don't know why, but I'm so sorry that you're going to go through that surgery. Hopefully they've already tried, hyaluronate or something in the joint to give you some moisture in there. I have it real bad on my left side. My jaw joint was clicking real bad eating tortilla chips a couple nights ago. It's like if you open your mouth and you get a click, you can hear it. Although that was, yeah, okay. Anyway. Stacy, she uses dryer balls with essential oils. Stacy, you just got to know that if you got cats, essential oils can be fatal to them. You got to be really careful with essential oils, okay? They are not friendly to our pets. Carol says, what kind of detergent do I use? I use Planet and always rinse everything twice. I was using Ivory Snow. That went off the market or it got really expensive. Then I went to Dreft for babies. That's my go-to, but that's really expensive. But they've just put some perfumes in it or something. It has a strong smell now. Then I switched to Arm & Hammer for sensitive skin. And I felt like that was irritating. And so I used the Environmental Working Group website and found Planet, which is a more natural one. And even then, I'm not so sure. I also only do powders. I don't get plastics at all. I don't get anything in a plastic container. I want to use powders the whole way, not only environmentally, but I just don't want the estrogens and stuff from the plastic. Dina, she's saying she wants to have children with IC. You're on the meds now for IC. What would I do? Dina, we have a pregnancy resource center right on our website, ic-network.com. Go over and read that. We have patient stories in there. IC patients have babies all the time. You're going to make a great mom. I don't think that's going to change that at all, but you do have to understand the pros and cons of medications. There are some medications that you will not be able to use, and some medications you will have to change, like a rescue installation. They recommend not using the sodium bicarb so that it does not penetrate towards the baby. But it's all over on the Pregnancy Resource Center on our website. And feel free to call me if you want to talk about it. Regina says, having her InterStim removed was horrible. Let me go back down to YouTube for a moment. Gina says, how soon does the magazine mail out? They got it yesterday. And so hopefully it'll be going out over the weekend or early next week. I'm just looking at YouTube here for a moment, guys. Karen on YouTube says that she's using D-mannose, that it seems to be helping her a little bit. You guys, D-mannose has no functional role in the bladder itself with respect to IC physiology and anatomy, other than D-mannose can bind to E. coli. And so if you have a history of recurring E. coli infections, using D-mannose makes sense. Or if you suspect that you might have a chronic infection, using D-mannose is reasonable. I also want to point out that, and let's see, I think it's in this magazine, L-arginine. Oh, yeah, it is in this one. It's under cold and flus. L-arginine, for any of you out there who have cold sores, you know, every now and then, you know, we get cold sores. Like the vast majority of people in the United States have herpes simplex 2, which is cold sores. We get it when we're kids from people kissing us. Let's see here. One patient in our, here it is. So we asked a question, what over-the-counter pain relievers do not bother your bladder? And it was Tylenol was the favorite, Advil was second, aspirin was 2, and then others were mentioned. But one patient said that she successfully uses L-arginine to reduce her discomfort. L-arginine has been studied with IC with favorable results and has been used to reduce the occurrence of viral infections and canker sores. This actually makes sense for patients who might be struggling with Hunner's lesions, with multiple research studies now showing possible viral infection. She says, I only take 1 L-arginine a day, usually from Whole Foods. This has taken away my pain and started working within 2 days. Pain only recurs when I overindulge in acidic foods, but goes away. And we interviewed years ago Lori Berter, who's one of the early, I think she was at the University of Alabama, one of the early L-arginine researchers. L-arginine, in addition to perhaps inhibiting viral growth, I always chew it if I feel like I've got a kink or sore coming. But L-arginine is one of the molecules in the cascade of chemical reactions that occur that help us pee. If I'm remembering correctly. So think about metabolizing into nitric oxide. Anyway, so, you know, there's something that's pretty benign. I mean, obviously do your research, but if you're prone to something like that, might be an interesting thing to try, but talk to your doctor about it first. Fiona's asking about the new supplement that's coming out. Yes, we have a new supplement coming out, hopefully by the end of the month. It's called Bladder Builder. It is very, very exciting. I think it's going to kick the butts out of all the other supplements because it's like the real next generation supplement. So it contains chondroitin for a bladder coating effect, quercetin for the antihistaminic effect, but it also contains beneficial bacteria. So it's a first supplement to actually include kind of a probiotic. And it has an ingredient from Europe that has been found to help with pain. It's called PEA. If you've ever heard of P-Pure, P-Pure came out about a decade ago. It's only made in Europe. It was various pharmacies would import it into the United States for patients struggling with pain. And company that is creating Bladder Builder was actually the first company to create a relationship with a manufacturer to bring it to the United States. And they're actually putting it into it. And it's already being tested by patients in 2 urology clinics. Very, very exciting. And one patient with intractable IC with severe pain is doing very, very well on it. So we're going to have it hopefully at the end of the month. My original intent when working with them is I wanted a supplement that was going to be in the $30 range. That's not going to happen with the supplement. It's still going to be in the $40 range. So I'm trying to make everything as affordable as I can by working with this company. The other thing about Bladder Builder that's really exciting is they're using absolutely nothing from China. There's no cheap chemicals from China in it. It's all sourced in the United States or Europe. And to me, that was a huge priority for me. I didn't want to sell anything that contained ingredients made in China. And because of that, it's still going to be in the high 40s eventually. I think I'm trying. I'm really trying. I'm trying to be your advocate. I remember when the company making Elmeron, the generic Elmeron came to me and said, how much should we charge for it? And I said $49 because that's what it used to cost 20 years ago. And they go, well, we were hoping to charge about $300 for it. And I went, it's a generic, for God's sake. The point of a generic is to make it affordable. $99 at the most. And they're like, no, I think we're going to do in the $250 range. And it's like, ugh. So we're trying. And it's not even available anyway in the United States. I don't even know what generic Elmeron costs up in Canada. But you can get it up in Canada if you want. If you have a prescription and stuff. Rita says, one question, I'm 6 years old, just started taking nortriptyline for my IC, working great. Just want to know, does it cause memory loss or dementia? I do believe that it fits into the category of being linked to cognitive decline. And so you're gonna want to read about it. Here, hold on a sec. Let me see if I can get an answer for that. Let's see here. That's why I can't wait to get on Twitch TV so you guys can see what I'm doing instead of my face talking to you. I want to screen share, but I need to be able to switch between both. Hon, I'm pretty sure that it fits in this group. I think you need to talk to your pharmacist and see if they're, and talk to your pharmacist about it. Remember, it's about dosage, you know, so the goal here, when the FDA warnings came out about SSRIs and cognitive decline, it was about people taking high amounts of it for a long period of time. So clearly in a circumstance like that, you're going to want to be the lowest dose possible, right? I'm impressed that you could tolerate the nortriptyline. I could not when I tried it. It was like the world was moving in slow motion when I was taking it. I was just did not work for me at all. Penny says her bladder capacity was less than 2 ounces. Now you've got up to about 8 ounces in the past 4 years learning nutrition. Penny, I would love for you to write up how you're doing that. If you want to share your story, I'd be more than happy to check it out. And if we can use it, share it with other patients. Angela, any studies on stem cell therapy and research for IC? It was only Dr. Elliot Lander at the California Stem Cell Treatment Center that was doing, that I'm aware of, that was studying stem cells in IC. He was doing fat-derived stem cells, creating something called stromal vascular faction, which was a slurry of stem cells and growth factors. So you had liposuction, they created the slurry, and then they gave it back to you. And the data was, it showed that it helped for the short term, but that patients had to, it was not what we call durable or longitudinal. It was a short-term success, and patients had to come back for more to continue that success. I haven't talked to him in a while, so I don't know what's happening with that. Sarah says she's convinced, you're convinced you have IC, but I'm having a hard time with doctors. They all told me that what you have is pelvic floor dysfunction, sent you to PT. I went for a long time and it helped some things, but not all the symptoms. And you got to remember there's something that I call the chicken versus the egg dilemma with the bladder and the pelvic floor. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And for us, it's which comes first, the bladder or the pelvic floor? The reality is that they're both involved. They have to be both involved because they're so intricately connected. So for some people, IC begins after a bladder injury like chemotherapy. So here's your, let's see, where's my, here it is. Oh, my face got yellow. What? There you go. Sorry about that. That was weird. Okay. So this is kind of a very simple way of looking at your pelvic floor. As your pelvic floor is kind of a webbing that goes from left to right, front to back, low to high. And its purpose is to hold organs in place for the most part, as well as help you move your legs, your hips, your lower back, stuff like that. If your symptoms began after a direct bladder trauma. So let's say you had chemotherapy, and we know chemo, specific forms of chemo are devastatingly irritating to the bladder. So here you've got a bladder that is just pulsing in pain. And here you've got a pelvic floor, and your pelvic floor is going to try to protect you. And it does that through the guarding reflex. So the muscles in the area of the pain get tight. It's called the guarding reflex. So if you had a bad UTI, or if you were raped, or, you know, those are moments when the pelvic floor is going to get tight to guard against that pain. But for this patient, our therapeutic priority really is an irritated bladder. What we're going to be doing is trying to calm and soothe that bladder to get it to stop pulsing so that these muscles will relax, right? But consider the other circumstance. What if you have a healthy bladder, but you sustain a muscle injury from a fall and your muscles go bam? So here you got this healthy bladder and the muscles around it are squeezing it like mad. And when you think about what happens when you see, and I'm sorry, the light is weird. If you squeeze your arm, look at where my fingers were. It drives the blood flow away, right? So muscle tension in your pelvis is going to restrict blood flow to your bladder. Now, you might not even know you have a pelvic injury. Your first sign might be frequency urgency. Okay, you have no idea what's happening here. All you know is that you feel like you have a UTI. You call the doctor, says, hey, I got a UTI, can you give me an antibiotic? Some doctors will say, sure, and they just prescribe you a broad spectrum over the phone, which is really bad practice. Or they'll say, yeah, come in and have a culture, and you're there crying, it's hurting really bad. The doctor doesn't have your results, but they give you antibiotics anyway, right? And the antibiotics don't work. Or they might work temporarily, but it comes back 2 weeks later, or a month later, 3 months later. So then they go, for a guy, well, maybe you got a prostate infection. Maybe you have chronic prostatitis. So they give you prostate meds. Or maybe you've got overactive bladder. Then they give you overactive bladder meds like ditropan, Detrol, all that sort of stuff. Those really don't work. You go back to the doctor and you're still dealing with this pain because you've still got this situation here. Then they throw the IC word out at you. Oh, you probably got IC. They give you the diet. Diet doesn't help that much. And they give you Elmeron. Doesn't work. Bladder installations doesn't work. None of those bladder treatments are going to work in this scenario because our fundamental problem in this scenario are muscles so tight that the bladder is not getting the nutrition and the oxygen that it needs to be healthy. So our therapeutic priority in this group is to release the muscle. And when you release the muscle, the bladder gets the nutrition it needs to be healthy again. And so when pelvic floor therapy was finally studied in the IC patient population, and that data was released from a multi-center National Institutes of Health clinical trial released in 2008, showing that pelvic floor physical therapy was remarkably successful at reducing the symptoms of IC. The entire IC world went, we had a WTF moment. It's like, what? Wait. But you say IC is a bladder problem. How the hell could muscle therapy work if this is a bladder problem? And that's when everybody went, oh, maybe IC really isn't a bladder problem in some people. Maybe IC has muscle issues. Maybe for some people it's muscle driven. And the fact of the matter is if you go back decades and you look at the early research studies and the early articles on IC, almost every one of them, doctors describe muscles so tight, they're like tight piano strings. They just didn't know. Medical school didn't teach the relationship between the pelvic floor muscles and how that can influence the bladder. And they're still barely doing that today. That's why, again, subtyping is so important. If you've got tight pelvic floor muscles, you got to work on them. You cannot, there are consequences. Some of you want to take a medicine. For God's sake, just give me Valium. Doesn't, listen, you got tight muscles and you take Valium. Okay, yeah, you might get a little release, but you'll never get where you need to go. Where you need to go is retraining this muscle. We got to get hands on the muscles, getting them to release. You know, it's like stretching, guys. You know, what do? We stretch like this. Those muscles get really tight if you've been sitting for a long period of time. We got to loosen them up. And hands-on physical therapy does that. I'm going to have to leave in the next 10 minutes because I got to go fix my parents' dinner. We're going to have raviolis and mushroom pizza. Not with a tomato sauce, by the way. It's going to be a Parmesan. Because my dad, who's 96, is really, his bladder is really sensitive to acid foods. It's amazing. He is now living my life from 40 years ago, having problems with food and frequency at night. And so I can't do tomato sauce. I can't do any citrus. It's remarkable how that's happened for him. And it's sad because he needs his sleep. He's 96. But it's very cause and effect. Eat the wrong food, bam, up that night. So Dottie says her pelvic pain specialists are Susan Spate Kellogg, who I know well. I don't know her personally, but her reputation stands for her. You're in excellent hands. Martha says, what about CBD oil for IC? In fact, we have a CBD oil success story in our magazine. This from a 68-year-old man in New York. He wrote me because he wanted other patients to hear what his success was using CBD oil. Again, this is in our latest IC Optimist, which is being mailed as we speak. I'll just read it to you. I was diagnosed, this is from a 68-year-old man. I was diagnosed with IC by a urologist 15 years ago. I could not tolerate Elmeron. I've had 7 bladder distensions, which used to give some relief, but the last one didn't. So I was just living with it, urinating up to 50 times in 24 hours. I started taking 2.5 milligrams of Cura Wellness CBD oil as it was claimed to help sleep. Between having IC and getting older, I was not sleeping well, to say the least. It actually has helped my sleep, even though I'm taking it in the morning. I wake up earlier now. I'm totally awake and ready to take on the day. Little could I imagine in only 2 months that I would experience almost an 80 to 90% relief from both, including his IC. I can now drink coffee, even drink beer without causing horrendous pain in my bladder and penis that I once had for years. I urinate much less often, getting up at night maybe 2 to 3 times instead of 10. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that CBD oil has helped tremendously for my IC. Maybe it won't work for everyone, but it's worked for me, and my quality of life is 1,000 times better. I just want to add my vast improvement of my IC due to CBD oil didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like you go to a doctor and tell him, okay, he says, it wasn't like you go to a doctor, the doctor prescribes a pill, you take a pill, and you feel better the next day. Especially since I first started on CBD for another reason, it took some time for me to realize that it had made vast improvements on my IC symptoms. So I'm pretty sure it took at least a week, maybe a little more, to really feel better. So I just want IC patients to know that most likely if they try CBD, it might take some time to feel some results. Again, I'm on 2.5 milligrams a day, the standard recommended dose, regardless of whatever health issue you are addressing. I also want to mention a friend told me his father could barely walk, spent most of the day in bed due to severe arthritis. Doctors had him on a cocktail prescription drug. Son convinced him to try CBD. He ditched the pain pills and is now walking and doing much better on CBD. So that is from DLD in East Hampton, New York. I love it when patients share their success stories. I love her face. You're never going to find a sad picture on the IC network. Never. I'm going to show you everything happy I can possibly show you because I want to give you hope. Dina is asking, how do you get off all the IC meds if you want to have kids? You have to have a plan. You have to work it out with your doctor and create a plan, hon. And you're going to have to be really good on your diet. Make sure you get subtyped properly. Let's make sure that any issue that needs to be addressed is addressed. If you've got fibroids can certainly make it harder to have a child. So if you got fibroids, we want to address that. If you got tight pelvic floor muscles, it's going to be hard to have sex so that you can make sperm meet egg. So there are going to be multiple things that you're going to be wanting to do over time, and it's going to take some time to plan it. But again, we've got some good patient stories on our website and our Pregnancy Resource Center, including a checklist of what patients went through as they were trying to do exactly what you're trying to do. So check those out. Stephanie, any tips for disability hearing? Yes, it's all about objective information. You have to remember that judges like facts. And when you describe your IC as getting up 20 times a night, 10 times a night, or that you have frequency or urgency, or that it's interfering with your ability to do your job or whatever, that's all pretty subjective. Some docs are sympathetic, and I mean, some judges are sympathetic, some aren't. Having hard facts will grease that wheel for you. And so I would, if you're claiming that you're sleep deprived, I would bring voiding diaries. You need to give him hard evidence over time showing that you're not able to sleep, that you're getting up every hour, every half hour. So make sure you do a voiding diary that shows the time that you're going, a volume, also rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10. And for anybody out there where you're thinking you're going to want to eventually apply for disability, every single time you go to your urologist, make sure you bring a 2-day voiding diary and get that put into your medical file, because that is good, hard data of your frequency, urgency, pain. So if 5 years later you decide to apply for disability, you will have 5 years worth of voiding diary that will be very, very compelling to anybody who reviews your case. Okay, that's really important. So voiding diary, pain diary, give it to your doctor, put it into the medical files just in case, okay? Abby, is endometriosis often mistaken for IC? No. The diagnoses wouldn't be mistaken, because endometriosis is really characterized by very, very painful periods and heavy bleeding, which is not a symptom of IC. So we don't see confusion in that respect. I mean, if you've got bad periods, they're not going to look at your bladder. They're going to look at your uterus and your ovaries. That said, urologists often don't, and urologists and gynecologists, they're comfortable playing in their sandbox. So the urologists focus on the urinary tract, the gynecologists focus on the reproductive system, and how they meet together is not really well respected sometimes. So that's where you, the patient, come forward. It's like, okay, if you've got super painful periods, in addition to your urinary symptoms, you would definitely want to say, you definitely want to ask for a sonogram, see if there's endo or fibroids, because that can be triggering urinary symptoms. Okay. Ellen says, I have a hot tub, but I'm afraid to get in it. What do you recommend? I never want to have a flare again. Well, heat relaxes muscles. So if you've got tight pelvic floor muscles, hot tub would be really great. However, you've got chemicals in that hot tub that for some of us can be very, very irritating. So you've got to be really on top of who's doing the chemicals. And you would never get into a hot tub after it's been treated. You always wait 24 to 48 hours to let those chemicals, the chlorine gas off. So as long as you do that and the chemicals are handled appropriately, I wouldn't be afraid of it. You can always put V Magic on your vulva, Vaseline, whatever down there to act as an extra barrier to keep those chemicals off of your tender bits. And the rule of thumb is as soon as you get out, take your swimsuit off and go take a shower and wash all the chemicals off of your skin. Fiona is already taking pee. Awesome. So Fiona, that's absolutely what's going into the new supplement. Stephanie says her doctor encouraged her to apply for disability. She was resistant because she loved her job, but it's amazing how much her pain levels have decreased since you quit. So that's informative. I mean, that's really informative, Stephanie. I'd be very, very interested in trying to figure out what it was about your job that was specifically triggering pain. Were you sitting too long? Were you driving too long? Were you exposed to any chemicals which are irritating? You know, or was it just an unhappy job that stressed you out? Like my last job was miserable. I absolutely hated it with passion. Kim says, it seems like when I relax, like you're sleeping, is when my worst symptoms start. Do some women experience that? Yeah, I had the same thing. I had, that was very, I can really relate to that for me with my left side hip / piriformis / hysterectomy recovery, which has all been on the left side. When I laid down, the spasms got worse, definitely. But it was about muscle position. And my current physical therapist did a really good job of explaining it to me. But I can't explain it. I'm not good enough to explain it to you here. But when you're laying flat, you're putting different pressures on the muscles, which may be triggering those muscles a little bit more. Be interesting to lay on your left side, your right side, knees up, knee down, one leg bent, one leg straight. I sleep on my stomach because when I sleep on my back, my left piriformis is not happy. So I tend to sleep on my stomach more. Stephanie, yes, there is a generic Elmeron, pentosan polysovate, made by company Swati Spentos, but it is not approved in the United States. You can get it from a Canadian pharmacy. Just be careful when you go online. A lot of companies that say they're Canadian pharmacies are actually down in the Caribbean or in China. It's very, very important that they have a Canadian mailing address, and I would even go so far as to call them and make sure they are a real pharmacy in Montreal or wherever. You don't want to get conned by one of these mail order ones. Can you have endometriosis years after hysterectomy? Yes, you can. Sure. Because they might not have gotten it all. And, you know, estrogen comes not only from your ovaries, but estrogen can be stored in fat. That's why menopausal women often have a belly fat, like I do right now, is because we actually store estrogen in fat. But estrogen can also come from plastic water bottles, from other things like that in the environment. And so, and also chemicals. We know that there are certain chemicals which are very strong estrogen mimickers, like, what's the name of it? It'll come to me. It's what happens when you burn plastic. It's the most deadly, most toxic chemical ever made by man. And it has been proven to cause endometriosis by far. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're not going to have new endometriosis, but you could have old endometrial cells that were left in place that are now responding to environmental estrogens and other estrogens. Share. Somebody's saying to Angie, it's probably your pelvic floor and you probably have scar tissue. Yeah, I have scar tissue right where my cervix was, and it's ugly. I was able to touch it the other day and it creeped me out. It didn't. I can remember the first, gosh, what was it? The first time I tried to do something after that hysterectomy, like, I don't know, like put in hormone cream or something, and the tube accidentally touched the incision, and I just about screamed. I walked out crying. I was so shaken. My dad looked at me and went, "What's wrong?" And I went, "You don't want to know, but I don't want to do that again." But it's way better now. You're just fresh from the surgery. You got basically the equivalent of an open wound. Tissues that you still have live stitches. They're going to be in there for 90 days. So you got to go slow with hysterectomy recovery. All right, guys, listen, it's 6:30 here. I got to go fix dinner for the folks. So here's the deal. I have a bundle of IC Optimist magazines. So the first 5 or 10 people who email me, their mailing address, please don't. Oh, actually, you know what? I take that back. I have them in print and I have them by email. Okay. Here's a freebie for today. If you email me your snail mail address, not your email. I mean, I'm obviously going to know what your email address is. Send me your snail mail address and I will either snail mail you a hard copy or email it to you. Put on the email which you would prefer. I'll give 10 out. And for the lady that I was talking with earlier who has the fibroids, please email me and just say, you know, hey, I've got the fibroids, and I will email you the article or whatever I can do. Okay. So I need you to send it to, here it is, icnetwork@mac.com. icnetwork@mac.com. And listen, guys, I know that when I email it to people, you're going to share it. But you got to understand that this is our fundraiser for the IC Network. So I would prefer that you not share it with 100 people. If you've got somebody in your life that's really suffering, 1 or 2 people, and you want to share it, that's fine. But it's really, really important that we get compensated for all of that hard work, because it's a lot of hard work, and I've got to pay a lot of money to get it done, and to writers and the desktop publisher and to the printers and all that sort of stuff. So giving it away is hard. All right. Okay. I always end these conversations with a very important message. I am looking at you right now. This is not your fault. You have done nothing wrong. There is no shame. There is no blame. I do not want you carrying any guilt on your shoulder. I don't want you thinking that you're damaged goods. I don't want you to think that you are unworthy. I don't want you to think that you are not worthy of the love of your family and friends. You are no different than someone who is hit by a car. You deserve love and support. And yet we IC patients, we're so good at hiding it, aren't we? I don't know why, but we are. And that's a tragedy, because you deserve their love and support. And if there's a gift to IC, look, I can hear your emails coming in. If there's a gift to IC, is that you will never, ever, ever walk away from someone in pain. You will be a better mother, a better friend, a better daughter, because you know what it's like to suffer at home alone. And you never, ever want that for someone else, right? Never. And yet, for some reason, we have this weird double standard and think that we should be that way. I want you to ask for help. If you need help, ask for help. You're entitled to that help. Okay, every day, I need you to do 3 things. Number 1, 15 minutes. Do something for your spirit and your soul. I don't care what it is. Hug a redwood, take a hike, go to church, do something that gives you comfort. Number 2, I want you to do something specifically for your pelvic pain in your bladder, whether it is following the IC diet, doing your pelvic floor physical therapy, which I have not done in 2 weeks. I am a bad person. I need to start doing it again. Do something that you know will help your bladder, help your pelvic floor, and create an environment that will support healing. And then number 3, every day, would you please do something to improve your knowledge for IC? Because as I say, no one could ever tell me IC's all in my head. I will smack them down with research, as I did last night with a doctor about yeast infections. And I pulled the research and sent it to him. And he was like, oh, and I was like, yeah, that's from the Center for Disease Control. You know, your knowledge level is important. And it is not knowledge that you get on Facebook. It is not knowledge that you get in a support group meeting. It is knowledge that you get in a library. Come to our website, read articles, go to the National Library of Medicine, pubmed.gov. Go to the Mayo Clinic, although they're not good at IC, but their website's good, but their clinical care, not so much for bladder issues. But let's mix it up here, my friends. Mix it up. Go to the ICA website, go to my website, go to the National Institutes of Health, go to the MAP Research Network. Build your brain skills here. Okay, the more you know, the better you're going to be able to advocate for yourself and create an environment so that the patients who are seen after you are treated with a little bit more respect, because you and I are educators. We are just the educators in this circumstance. So, all right, my friends, Facebook, I'm going to say goodbye to you first. I wish you well. As always, please come on back to the IC Network website, ic-network.com. Sign up for our free newsletter. Become a member if you like this, because it will keep me doing it. I love doing it. I love doing these support. I love being a support group leader. So if you have not been to our website, where is my slide? ic-network.com. Oh, here it is. Please come on over and visit. We've been here 25 years. We are the top-rated website, according to Harvard Medical School and the University of London, as being the most accurate, reliable, credible of all the IC websites out there. And I'm very proud of that distinguishment. And I was going to say something else, but I don't remember what it was. All right. So I'll see you later, Facebook, YouTube. I'm coming to you next. Have a good one. All right, YouTube. Hello, my friends on YouTube. I have 7 of you there. Hold on a sec. I'm moving you up, so I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, so let's see here. Gwen loves her new physical therapy. I was told you had 2 hot spots inside. Good. I'm glad they found them. Lisa, will it be possible to switch from Cysto Protect to the new supplement? Does this need to be done slowly overnight? I always say slowly. You know, there's never, I'm never into big sudden changes in our bodies for anything, especially chemical. So I would do a 1-to-1 swap. But I will talk with the researchers one more time and make sure that we have a good plan on that. And it's nice to see you, Lisa. Nice to see you. Both Lisas, Lisa White and Lisa Myers. Nice to see you. Thank you, Christine, for your very kind words. And you have my email, icnetwork@mac.com. And look at this. We had no stalkers today. No people coming in and saying really things. Marie says, I have Hunter's lesions, really having a bad flare, having lots of pain. I'm not getting much help. What is the name of the new drug? It's not a drug. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy would be something that I think you could definitely consider, along with the bladder builder supplement. Again, it's very early. We don't have any, you know, we know research studies have been done at this point in time. We've got researchers working on it, but that takes time and money. And so what the researchers and clinicians have told us is they feel the formula is so good that we just really need to bring it to market and give patients an opportunity to give it a try. So there you go. Seashell, I'm in Pocatello, Idaho, on Medicaid and disability. How do I find a good doctor? We have a list on our website of doctors, although Idaho does not have a lot of doctors. I don't remember specifically what it was in Idaho. I would check that out, but you're just probably going to have to call around urogynecologists, urologists. And if worse comes to worse, you can go over to Seattle to the IC Research Center at the University of Washington. All right. All right, my friends, I got to go. I will see you later.